Voila. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the National Urban Design Roundtable event. Tonight or this afternoon, depending where you are, we're celebrating the 2022 recipients of the National Urban Design Awards, and we'll engage in a lively roundtable discussion with our award recipients. Alors, bienvenue à la soirée célébrant les prix nationaux de design urbain. Nous célébrons ici les lauréats des prix nationaux de design urbain et nous engageons dans une table ronde animée avec nos lauréats. This evening is presented by the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects, the Canadian Institute of Planners, and the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada. My name is Michelle Legault, and I am the Executive Director of the CSLA, and I'm delighted to be emceeing tonight. Cette soirée est présentée par l'Association des architectes paysagistes du Canada, l'Institut canadien des urbanistes et l'Institut royal d'architecture de Canada. Je m'appelle Michelle Legault et je suis la directrice générale de l'APC. Ravie d'être avec vous ce soir. So I would like to begin first by acknowledging the land on which we work, study, and live, as well as the Indigenous peoples who are the caretakers of that land. So please place your feet on the ground and breathe the air in your location. Since this event is being held online, a singular land acknowledgement does not capture all our group here today, but I acknowledge the importance of the land we each call home. As the CSLA, CIP, and RAIC offices and staff are primarily based in Ottawa, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Alors, reconnaissons la terre sur laquelle nous travaillons, étudions et vivons, ainsi que les peuples autochtones qui en sont les gardiens. Je vous invite à poser vos pieds sur le sol et à respirer l'air. Comme cet événement se déroule en ligne, aucune reconnaissance de la Terre ne peut englober tout notre groupe aujourd'hui. Mais je reconnais l'importance de la Terre que nous appelons chacun notre chez-soi. Comme les bureaux et le personnel de l'APC, de l'ICI et de l'IRAC sont principalement établis à Ottawa, nous reconnaissons le territoire traditionnel non cédé du peuple algonquin Anishinaabe. Merci. Thank you. There is a natural overlapping of architecture, landscape architecture, and planning within many urban design projects. The National Urban Design Awards, now in its 9th edition, promotes the important role that urban design, and by extension these disciplines, play in maintaining and enhancing the quality of life in Canadian cities. So in lieu of a traditional award ceremony, we thought we would capitalize on the extreme talent of our award recipients and engage them in a discussion on the ways in which architecture, landscape architecture, and planning play an integral role in the vibrancy of our built landscape. Emeka Nnadi, a landscape architect and founder of Nnadi Group, and one of the 3 jury members on this year's panel, will moderate what I know will be a fascinating discussion. Il y a alors un certain chevauchement naturel entre l'architecture de paysage et l'urbanisme dans bon nombre de projets de design urbain. Les prix nationaux de design urbain, qui en sont maintenant à leur 9e édition, valorisent le rôle important que joue le design urbain et par extension ces disciplines pour le maintien et l'amélioration de la qualité de vie dans les villes canadiennes. C'est pourquoi, plutôt que de tenir une cérémonie traditionnelle, nous avons choisi de mettre à profit l'immense talent de nos lauréats et les faire participer à une discussion sur le rôle essentiel de l'architecture de paysage et de l'urbanisme pour dynamiser notre paysage bâti. Emeka Nnadi, architecte paysagiste et fondateur de Nnadi Group, et l'un des 3 membres du jury de cette année, va animer la discussion qui sera fascinante, j'en suis certaine. We would now like to share a presentation of the 2022 National Urban Design Award winners. And I would ask that the participants turn off their video and audio for this presentation and for the first part of the discussion. Alors, nous allons partager maintenant une présentation des lauréats des prix. Et je vous demanderai de, s'il vous plaît, fermer vos caméras et votre audio pour la présentation, ainsi que pour le début de la discussion. Merci. Thank you for that presentation and congratulations to all the laureates. Alors, bravo, félicitations à tous nos lauréats. I would now like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Emeka Nnadi. A CSLA member, Emeka graduated with a bachelor's degree in architecture from the Enugu State University of Technology in Nigeria and earned a master's degree in landscape architecture from the University of Manitoba. He founded the Nnadi Group in 2010 after working as a landscape architect and development manager in Chicago and an urban designer at a prominent engineering and design consultancy in Winnipeg. Emeka, who also served as one of the 2022 jury members, will lead tonight's discussion for about 50 minutes, followed by an audience Q&A session. So please, if you have any questions for our laureates, please add them to the chat box. We will be monitoring that box and we'll collect questions for the Q&A period. Alors, j'aimerais maintenant vous présenter le modérateur de la discussion, Emeka Nnadi. Il est membre de l'APC et Emeka est titulaire d'un baccalauréat en architecture de l'Université de technologie de l'État d'Enugu au Niger et d'une maîtrise en architecture de paysage de l'Université du Manitoba. Il a fondé le Nnadi Group en 2010 après avoir travaillé comme architecte paysagiste et gestionnaire de développement à Chicago et de designer urbain dans une firme d'ingénierie et de design bien en vue de Winnipeg. Emeka, qui a aussi fait partie du jury de 2022, animera la discussion de ce soir qui durera d'environ 50 minutes et sera suivie d'une période de questions. Alors, si vous avez des questions pendant la discussion, veuillez les ajouter dans la boîte de discussion et nous y adresserons à la fin de la séance. Over to you, Emeka.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I'm delighted to be here. It's my distinct pleasure to be moderating this award ceremony. I think this is the first time we're doing this virtually, and I just love what the virtual platform allows us to do. So my goal over the next 50 or so minutes is to get to know our category winners a little bit more personably, and to get to understand their motivation behind their projects. We certainly celebrate their awards and we celebrate the excellence of urban design in Canada. And this is just a great forum for that. So without dragging things too much longer, let's start the first part of our conversation and really get things going by getting to know you individually. So what I'm going to do is maybe ask each winner to talk a little bit about themselves, talk a little bit about their practice, and maybe give us a little tiny insight into what motivates them personally and professionally to strive for excellence. So I'm just going to pick. Let's maybe start with the University of Toronto. And I think Mark Scholen is here to speak on behalf of that group. Mark, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and this entry.
Sure, I'm Mark Scholen, principal of Scholen Company. We're a landscape architecture firm that has over the years really specialized in sustainable design and natural heritage planning. And that's why this award's really important to us, because although we are specialists in low impact development design and sustainable planning, we do a lot of urban design work and a lot of park planning and design. And really this is kind of a nice recognition of the design skill of my team and the passion of my client really on this project. It was a challenging project, lots of stakeholders, extremely difficult site. And at the end of the day, I think it created a really unique, dynamic place for everybody to enjoy, to access the valley and to experience the environment.
And I think you guys did a fabulous job, as did the other jurors, my co-jurors. Thank you for that intro. It gives us a little insight into you and your practice. Well, let's just scooch over to my old boss. I hope he's here. Is Scott Sturton on cue on behalf of Perkins and Will. Well, that's what I have on my list, but who's representing Perkins and Will on the True North Square project?
That'd be Ryan Bragg.
Okay, Ryan, I apologize there.
Not a problem. So we're a studio that spans across Canada and across the world, And we are very much sustainability and design focused. And our design center brings us to look at urban design in a way that I think we've had the opportunity over the last 10 years to do a number of projects, which I would call city building projects. Projects which can set the bar for development. It can change the way that cities react to different technologies and different urban plans. And in whether it's repairing an urban fabric or creating really rich and diverse practice areas, that's what we really love to do with regards to urban design, is to challenge ourselves and challenge the environment that we're in to create something that's infinitely better than what existed beforehand.
Well, it's really nice to put a personal face to Perkinson Will. I think a lot of us practitioners have looked at your firm as really one of the leaders over the past decades in sustainable design, and it's also fantastic to see that you did something here in my hometown of Winnipeg. So appreciate that on a personal note. This is great. So speaking about hometown Winnipeg, Devin Segal represents Fathom Studio, and Devin, maybe tell us a little bit more about you for the audience.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. It's really a privilege. I'm Devin Segal. I'm the Director of Landscape Architecture and partner at Fathom Studio. We're an interdisciplinary design studio based out of Halifax, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, all the way on the East Coast. And like Emeka said, I'm originally from Winnipeg, so also a prairie boy. Our practice is quite interdisciplinary. We're a relatively small office in the context of Canada and North America, with under just shy of 40 designers, but a very interdisciplinary practice of landscape architects, planners, architects, environmental graphic designers, and we work on projects of all scales. And I think we derive a lot of our passion and for our work from working with smaller communities, marginalized groups. A lot of folks who get overlooked, whether it's due to budget or simply a history of whether it be prejudice or colonialization. So we're really passionate about allowing those people to shine and really feel proud about their communities.
Well, thanks for that intro, Devin. That's always great to hear. I mean, I love the diversity amongst this group, and it shows that urban design and excellence in urban design can really happen at a number of different scales and a number of different challenge points. So I guess, seeing as I'm on a sort of a central Canadian role and Winnipeg role, why don't I get Liz and Peter of Public City Architecture to tell the world and tell all of us a little bit about their practice. I know them personally, but we all want to hear it.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for having us here today. We're super excited to be representing Winnipeg so solidly today. Yeah, I'm Liz Reeford. I'm the principal landscape architect at Public City, and beside me is Peter Sampson, the principal architect of Public City. So we are both the owners of the firm, which is an even smaller firm than Fathom, quite significantly smaller. But it is we call it a transdisciplinary firm that really works in between architecture and landscape architecture as seamlessly as possible. And I think our philosophy is really embedded in our name of our firm, which is Public City, where we really believe that the public realm needs stewards, and we try and do that in all of our work, whether it's interior or exterior work.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Well, you definitely,
Yes.
you definitely did do it here, and we're delighted to see what you've accomplished and to celebrate that accomplishment with you. I believe I have Laura here from Toronto, Yongmin Yi or Laura, on behalf of the Mobile Support Shelter Support Project.
Yes, and also my partners here, Michelle. And
Hello.
Well, hello, Michelle and Laura. Tell us about yourselves and your organization, please.
So we are master student from UFT Daniels, and I think one of our partner Edward's also joining soon. So we are major in architecture, and it's glad to be here.
Good, good. So you have a long career ahead of you in architecture, and look at how it starts with the National Urban Design Award. That's fantastic. Well, thank you for your passion and for your entry. Last but not least, Paul Killig and Carla Stewart on behalf of Rob.
Hi, everybody. Paul Kulig, and I believe it's actually Ernestine that's here from the Jane Finch Center. I think the question around practice is sort of salient, and I'd maybe argue that a lot of the really successful or all of the sort of award winners here have moved beyond a kind of traditional mode of practice, moved out of that ivory tower arrangement and engaged with the practice out in the field in new ways that allows us to respond to the conditions of public health and COVID, but also kind of the needs of our communities. And I think the Corner Commons work was really an example of that, and working with the Jane Finch Center allowed us to do so. And maybe Ernestine, if you could talk more about that partnership and the other authors of this design.
Yeah, for sure. So as Paul was saying, Corner Commons was kind of a collaboration that was coordinated by the Jane Finch Center, which is a social service agency based out of the Jane Finch neighborhood in Toronto, as well as Perkins and Will, but also just guided by the community kind of fully from the beginning up until like the installation, and then continuing on till now. We're still working on the project now, and we have also had many design students helping us along the way. So it was definitely a very collaborative process the entire way.
Yes, thank you for that. We did pick up on the highly collaborative nature of your project and the necessity for that in the social services realm that is your space of expertise. So that's great. I hope that that's given not just myself, but everybody viewing a little bit of an insight into the award recipients today and what's behind the passion that led them to win these awards. Kind of the next step or the next part of our dialogue today is I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into the awards, into the projects that have won the awards, and I'm going to go around the table again and ask each one of you to maybe identify a point or a theme or a topic of specific interest, perhaps an extremely challenging aspect of your work or of this particular project, something that can shed more light into some of the struggles or some of the real efforts or inspirations that occurred during the process of your project. I think it's great to sort of read the jurors' comments and maybe look at the images or slides, but it's given that we have this forum, I'd really like each one of you to maybe tell us a little something that may not be that obvious about what you accomplished here, and maybe mixing things up a little. I'm going to start with Liz, just because I can. Maybe Liz, if you could tell us a little bit about how you came to win this Urban Fragments Award for Park, and what some of the real challenges or some of the real interest points were in that project.
Yeah, sure. So I think, there were many. It was a project that started just before COVID, but was implemented during the very beginning times of COVID. So there were many challenges and sort of changes that came along the way during that process. Something that's really rewarding for this project, as well as other similar projects that we've done, is that we actually fabricated the project in Winnipeg. Oh, here's a picture of it. That's perfect. So we have local partners in Winnipeg. The project was built the site is in Calgary, but we actually built all of it here with our partners at Wood Anchor, Jay Neufeld, who builds a lot of our projects for us. And the really exciting thing there is that we get to, work together. This is actually a design build project, and make sure that we're doing everything the way that we want it to be and make decisions on the fly and kind of see all of it come together before it comes to the site. And the other great thing about that model is that it can be installed on site in a really short amount of time. So these kind of projects that we do, they're almost like an instant park, like park in a box. And I think the installation was something like 4 days or something. So in the case of being a park on a paid parking lot, that was really useful because they didn't lose very much revenue during the time. They didn't have to close the parking lot for very long. And then maybe the other thing about it is, a challenging thing was actually getting a permit for a public space that was a permitted use for people and cars at the same time. And that was really new for Calgary. It sort of set a precedent.
A reinterpretation of the WUNORF in terms of Calgary.
Yeah, so it's like, they actually gave us a real permit so that cars and people could occupy the same space at the same time. And that was really tricky. It took a long time to get that permit. Yeah. And convincing everybody that, it was going to be okay. In the end, we had to make a few concessions. Like we had to make sure that the basketball hoop could be locked in an up position when cars were in there. But that was sort of it. We convinced them that it was, it was all going to be okay. And it has been. And that was a 2-year pilot project. And just recently, we've heard that the Calgary Parking Authority would like to make it a permanent park on their paid parking lot. So
if I can just jump in, I think 2 of the other challenges that I think we were faced with more at a practice level was, I think at the time that we were doing this park, we were asking ourselves about whether architecture and landscape architecture had or had not accepted social media as part of the public realm. And I think there was a question we hadn't really formulated in our own mind at the time. I think we were asking ourselves whether that was cheap or whether that had value. And I think through this project, we've kind of developed a real confidence of a role for professionals in the world of social media, that the way to light up a space that was otherwise turned off in Calgary, the way to turn something on was to invite a new generation to participate in it. So one of the ways that we approached the large sort of super graphic way of the park was to look at park signs across Alberta that are a lot more inviting about prescribing uses for spaces. Picnic table is an invitation without a big red circle and a slash through it. It's usually an invitation to come and do something in a national park. And when we think of public parks, not exclusively, but often we're confronted with signs that say no skateboarding, no loitering, no eating, no hanging out. And so we, at the same time as social media, the social media question, we were asking ourselves, can you create a different mode of urban park that is an invitation to come and do things as opposed to not do things, which is what we're often confronted with in the municipal park environment. So to feed into the idea that the public realm for us is a place of invitation and a place of joy and celebration, I think this was kind of one of the driving forces behind the site, and it was a sort of test for us whether or not it would work. And it's
right. Well, I think you guys did a phenomenal job of it, and so did my fellow jurors. It's exceptionally well done. I didn't realize that you built most of it in Winnipeg and moved it over to Calgary, and the idea of a custom permit that allows people and vehicles inhabit the same place at the same time obviously is quite novel.
Painted by friends and family, and ourselves included.
I just got a reminder that I did forget to introduce someone or have someone speak about their work. So if it's not too late, if we can have Andrea Manton from Brook McElroy. Yes. Hi there, and Andrea. I apologize for skipping you. Maybe you could quickly tell us about your practice.
Sure. Sure, thank you. I am Andrea Manton, as you said. I'm a landscape architect with Brooke McElroy. We're about a 40 person, so mid-size, I would say.
Yep.
And we're based primarily in Toronto, but have offices in Winnipeg. So we have that connection. We're on the right bandwagon tonight. Offices in Winnipeg and in Thunder Bay. We are multidisciplinary. We started out as an urban design and planning practice and have since grown organically to take on architects and landscape architects. We also have kind of a unique focus of our practice is an Indigenous design studio that's led by Indigenous planners and architects and really lead our projects that have a cultural focus, including this one at Saugeen First Nation, which was a really important project for us.
Right. And maybe I'll take the opportunity of having you on kind of the podium right now for you to tell us. We were, as jurors, we were really enamored with the solution and the resolution of your project. Perhaps you can give us some insight into things that might not have been readily obvious to us or to people seeing the project about the work that you did there.
Sure. For those who don't know, this project was really instigated by a desire to bring economic renewal into the community. On site, there had been for about 40 years a large amphitheater that had fallen into disrepair. So one of the opportunities that came out of a restoration project was the training, and you'll bring up the photo here in a minute, was the training of First Nation community members to be skilled stonemasons. So 8 men and a few other assistants restored this large amphitheater. And it was truly the most amazing part of the project, and working with these men and other community members in imagining how this is really transforming lives from individuals to the larger community. The design work that we did is always thinking about how to engage these individuals in the work, not only in the design process. There was a fairly thorough engagement process where community aspirations and economic aspirations were brought to light, but really thinking through the buildings, through the amphitheater, through ramps and fireplaces and gathering places, how the community could be engaged to build, to program, and really participate in the future of the project. So that was really the big driver for us, was really understanding that profound impact that this kind of individual work can have.
Yes, yeah, I'm just going to read a quick paragraph from our jurors' comments. I'm sure some of you have seen that already, but this resonates with what you're saying now. So we had said this was a beautifully executed project with exceptional attention to Indigenous learning, collaboration, to the environment, and to land-based knowledge and storytelling. The reuse of authentic material and the striking culturally appropriate architectural form lends a profound authenticity to the work. So it's interesting to hear that the most important, or the most crucial piece of this, was actually the engagement and the sort of the civic engagement process that you went through with these people. So thank you very much for that. Description. I think, and that's what I love about doing it this way. I get to learn so much more about the project than just reading it, or frankly, even just being a juror. Okay, let's keep going. I will maybe ask Ryan Bragg of Perkinson Will to tell us about the unknown challenges or the opportunities that the True North Square presented and actually from my office I can see the True North Square right here out the window. It's fantastic.
Well, one of the things many might not know is that it was actually a competition to start out with, and with all competitions there's that wonderful opportunity where you get to read into the program what you want. And what what we read was that the client, who is a developer client, also owns the Winnipeg Jets, they wanted to really gift a public space to the city. It wasn't quite that altruistic, but what we read into the program was that everything that they were doing was focused around this public space. And so with PFS Studio, we worked through the design that we came up with in the competition. And what it really does is it focuses all of the elements of the project around this public space. As well, it's really contextual. Because it was a private competition, we got to see all the entries afterwards. So we got to look at all of our competitors' work. And we were the only ones who didn't do a massive tall tower. Our proposal was relatively compact. And that was driven by our original thoughts and explorations around trying to create the most climate responsive project. And it came from the understanding that this space needed to be used all the way through the year. It wasn't just going to be a space that when it was nice and sunny in the summer day, you went out and used it, but in fact, there was engagement to occur throughout the year. And so that drove us to looking at how we can protect that public space from the winds. So there's an encompassing street wall, and then literally can carve out the space to allow the light in, even in the middle of winter. And so all of that kind of drove the interface in trying to figure out exactly what it was we could do that would help to engage people and would bring people out on a cold February day. Or a site visit when it was minus 39 or something like that. But what it inevitably drove us to was to investigate the response to the skywalk system. For those of you who don't know Winnipeg skywalk system is essentially the plus 15. And what we did is, even in the competition, we came up with 3 rules that we needed to follow. And one was, whenever you were in the skywalk system, you needed a recognition of your surroundings. You needed at all times to know exactly where you were within the urban fabric. You needed to have access to and from, it needed to be visible, and that access needed to be very public. You couldn't go through other spaces. It needed to be, the wayfinding needed to be important. And then it needed to be visible. So what we managed to do was create a scenario where there is no place in the skywalk system where you actually don't engage with the public. You don't engage with the public realm that's right below you. And although it seems like a small thing in some ways on a large project, I think it actually speaks to sort of the tenor of the project. It speaks to wanting to engage the public with other means, other people within the public. And it's even when you have to, from an urban design point of view, no one wants to pull people off the street. But even if you have to do that, there's a way to do it that is sensitive to the public realm. And so that was one of those elements that really drove us from a competition point of view all the way to occupancy.
Right. Well, thanks for that. We think it was a highly successful piece of urban microclimate carving, very, very craftily done, and I'm certainly excited and thrilled to be living in the city with True North Square. So let's keep going. I'm a little cognizant of time. Perhaps Devin, you can tell us a little bit more about the Main Street development in Yarmouth.
Sure. So many challenges, so many constraints, but probably more than we have time for. Yeah, but I mean, I think it drove us to do something that we were extremely proud of and find really innovative ways to meet those challenges. I mean, essentially what we were working with was 9 sidewalk bump outs of less than 9 square meters, 100 square feet. And what could we do within those spaces to unite an entire main street or 3 blocks of a main street and provide amenity and sense of community and whimsy and something that the community could be proud of and really show themselves off to the world. This community being one of, this is a small town of now of a population of about 7,000 people, which is on the edge what they call themselves is on the edge of everywhere. So here we are on the southern shore of Nova Scotia, 300 kilometers away from the nearest large urban center, being Halifax. And with that comes the challenges of material and skilled labor, and all you can imagine the challenges associated with that remoteness. But we found ways to work with local. The project was built entirely locally. That we used the expertise that was available to us from the shipbuilding industry, from boat building and boat repair, and so in the material, everything from the material selection of the structures themselves to the custom seating, which are actually modeled off of a traditional wood chair, or three traditional wood chairs.
Those aren't wood chairs?
No, those are cast in aluminum.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to read one of the paragraphs in our jury comments for you and see how you respond to that. So we immediately called this a delightful stroke of well-anchored tactical urbanism. The project solicits nostalgic themes from the town's history. It reimagines elements with a clearly contemporary twist, and we're talking about the buildings, the kind of the sections of buildings and stuff, and then activates them with bold colors, lighting, and pleasant, memorable furniture. We didn't realize these chairs were cast iron, and part of what we thought for the structures was that it looks really quite resilient and durable. It must be built out of cast iron or steel or metal, because it can't be that thin and wear that well. And we kind of thought, well, the chairs might not weather quite as well if they were wood chairs. But so it's interesting to realize that that's actually a cast iron reinterpretation of the traditional wooden chair. So that's really fascinating. It's extremely gratifying to know that this is not just tactical urbanism, but it's permanent tactical urbanism. This stuff is built to last.
Yeah, and I would say, equally, to these very bold gestures here, the planting design, we were trying to almost create vignettes of the local landscape. That was the kind of the ultimate goal, was to take a piece of this really unique coastal landscape and bring it into a downtown, right into the urban center, and create these small oases in the space that provided an incredible, very versatile, creating so much amenity, shade, shelter. They're pollinator gardens. I can go on and on about the weight that these, again, 100 square feet. Not 9 of them that these spaces are pulling. One is the street's bus shelter. And again, the space is completely transformed at nighttime. The lighting was a very simple scheme, but I think we did it very cleverly by our choices of color.
You did a fascinating job, and I think we all think that it worked out really well, and it's quite the pleasurable project to take in and to experience. So well done on that one.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Let's see now. So Paul and Clara, maybe we can talk about Corner Commons.
Yeah, we can touch on Corner Commons, but I think that we're realizing that we share a lot of similarities with the Park project, as we were also a public space project in the midst of a parking lot. So kind of challenges navigating how we create a welcoming and safe public space for people to enjoy all summer long while also being in an operating parking lot. Had its challenges, and kind of all that thrown in with some COVID challenges as well. As we've been working on this project for a few years, actually. So prior to all this, we had our design set out for a pre-COVID world where things didn't need to be physically distanced. So there was kind of a lot of pivoting along the way. And so making sure to build kind of modular furniture that can be separated and as kind of changing guidelines and health and safety practices go along, we can maybe merge things together, create like more group settings and seating. But also it did present a lot of great ways that a public space can be used during COVID. In the Jane Finch neighborhood, public spaces that are neutral, centrally located, welcoming were definitely something that we'd heard the community talking about, but was only emphasized during COVID when people wanted to go outside and kind of safely engage with others and socialize. So Corner Commons definitely kind of approach those situations and try to create space for a welcoming and safe space for people. So through our programs as well, we had a lot of COVID kind of related programming. We had vaccine clinics running out of our space. We also had many community groups rallying and doing outreach on important issues in the neighborhood that was happening, many of which kind of were heightened during COVID. So it was definitely great to see kind of the ways that public space can be used during this time, which was something that was really rewarding for us.
Yeah, let me take a quick minute to read one of our comments, which really reflects what you just said. So we had said the project highlights extensive community involvement. I think that was really obvious, and I love the idea that urban design isn't just urban design. It has to, by definition, engage communities and civic challenges and sort of urban realities. So that's what you did. So the project highlights extensive urban community involvement. It showcases how a space is revitalized through varied programming. It depicts community involvement as seen in the construction and execution of the project. It involved an inclusive and intensive conceptual process that considered the community's feedback. So it wasn't urban design as a noun, it was urban design as a verb, and it was really pivoting around the feedback of the community. So really well done. I didn't have an image for that, but we've seen it, and we celebrate that with you. So thank you very much, Clara. Mark, perhaps we can talk a little bit more about the University of Toronto's accessible trail.
Sure, glad to do it. Just for context, University of Toronto Scarter College has one of the most diverse campus communities in Canada, and it's also prides itself as being one of the most accessible campus facilities in Canada. So that's kind of laying the foundation for the project.
Right.
From a physical design perspective, the original campus was built on the Highland Creek Valley, but there was never any access to the valley from the campus itself. So our job was to find a way to get people from the upper campus 26 meters down into the valley through an environmentally sensitive area without damaging the environment and by providing universal access for all. So the real challenge here is taking that 26-meter vertical height and stretching it out over 450 meters of longitudinal length, and then winding it down through the valley amongst the existing significant trees and vegetation communities, and making it all work and making it all buildable. So from a design perspective, that was the key challenge.
So my question for you, Mark, is how did you make it work?
Many hours on the drafting table.
I see.
Many hours of calculating the radii and making the sinuosity work. But one of the things that's important about this project is it had to be built modularly. So each one of those precast concrete panels that you see in the photograph is identical in its configuration, its angularity, and they were all dropped in place by a crane from above so that we had a light footprint on the valley floor. Similarly, the lighting system, because we're in an area that's significant wildlife habitat, we couldn't have pole-mounted lights in the traditional sense. So we have over 1,200 1-watt lights in the railing that provide the 1-foot candle of light at base for public safety for those that use the trail in the evening. And then our client group was very diverse and provided us with great inspiration and insights. So we had the traditional elder from University of Toronto, assisting us in identifying indigenous medicinal plants that we could use in the landscape. We had the culinary arts faculty advising us on forage plants and plants that would bear fruit and vegetables that they could use in the culinary program. And the accessibility advisory committee was just incredible in terms of telling us about things that we would never have known otherwise. This led to the positioning of mobile vehicle charging stations on the ramps themselves, so that we never get restranded.
Right.
And the coloration and the color and texture of things for those that are visually impaired provide guidance all the way down the slope. So great client, amazing site, challenging project, but we at the end of the day, I think it's become a real destination at the University of Toronto.
I mean, the solution is really exemplary. And let me just, I know you've probably seen this, but let me highlight again some comments from the jury. We noted immediately, you said, a light touch and an appropriate level of authorship are the characteristics that make this project exemplary. We said this project is recognized for its attention to detail, for its inclusiveness, hence the accessibility, and for its ecological sensitivity. So when you talk about these pieces being modular and being craned in for a light, ecological footprint, and we talk about each of those being constructed offsite, and you talk about the lumens and the light candles so as not to put light standards or posts traditionally on it. All of those things we picked up on. We say that the design articulation from macro to micro is consistent and flows really well. The colors, textures, and materiality contribute to the project's overall success. Even your choice of Cortland steel and your care with preserving the existing vegetation all come through. So it's a lot of work went into it, but at the end it just seems like it ought to have been there all along, and it's a marvel of creativity. So I think we're all quite excited about this, and we celebrate your award and your success with this. So thank you very much for this project and for submitting it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, last but not least, our student award for student projects, Laura and partner. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your project.
Yes, for sure. I think Edward is also here, and Laura and Edward, please feel free to jump in whenever. But I guess when we started the project, a lot of our challenges started from the very beginning, from the research phase. We were looking at the unhoused population in Toronto, and specifically at shelter support infrastructure. And the question really was how you design spaces, public spaces, for people who are normally neglected or invisible or isolated from the city, people who have experienced trauma. How do you design those spaces for them? And we were going back and forth looking at the shelter system and also these common brick and mortar solutions for these groups. So I guess the question that we came up with was, why are we designing these brick and mortar solutions like shelters, respite centers for a population who is inherently mobile, that move around a lot? And I guess not the solution, but the approach we came with it was actually designing a support network. So designing these vehicles and interventions that actually engage with this population at a more transient level. And this really lays the groundwork for real community collaboration, lays the ground for housing. But at the very initial point, it was how to design for a population who is always moving around, who is hidden from the city, and really trying to engage with them. So that was perhaps one of the more challenging aspects of the project.
Right.
But
I think,
I
just let me quickly interrupt you there, and I apologize for doing so. But the jury we were curious about a couple of things. I mean, we were really inspired at a nimble response to a problem that usually is institutionally solved by more bricks and mortar. In your case, it was a nimble, a mobile in some fashion solution that actually met the problem exactly where it was. But we had two questions about this. How did you come to understand and read the problem for what it was? I mean, we were wondering if you had personal or close experiences with homelessness or with this sort of challenge, or how experientially, how do you understand the problem the way you came to understand it? That was really sort of, it struck us, and we were awed by that. And the other maybe more mundane question was this a studio project in school, or did you do this separately from that? Because it was really well thought out, extremely thoroughly delivered, and frankly, all of the jury members were quite impressed at your work. So maybe you can help me uncover the answers to those two questions, if you don't mind.
So I guess I will quickly explain the project a little bit. So it is a studio project for our fourth semester. And it was, as you can tell, is a good project done by 3 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And the studio was intended to be an urbanism studio. So we were thinking, picturing an area with a specific topic, and to think in a more urban master plan scale at the beginning. And eventually we need to develop almost like an architectural building in like a specific site, and to make more of like a design approach to that. So I guess like at the beginning, why you were mentioning about why we so familiar with homelessness, or how we come up with this kind of topic.
Yeah, how you uncovered it so sensitively.
I think one of the major reason is that for me as a background, that personally, I'm really interested into modular construction. And usually when we think about something modular or something that is prefabricated, it's always related to like minor groups, or we think about supportive housing and that kind of perspective. And the other reason that I think we are also interested in the topic, because during COVID, we have read so many news about the rising of the homeless population. And doing studio, we were just really interested in picking this kind of topic, which is the thinking about what the infrastructure can be improved. And during the studio time, we also talked to different people, such as like the tiny shelters support groups in Toronto, and other architecture firm that also deal with similar projects.
Oh, I see. So that's where you source some of your how you source some of your inspiration, and you uncovered some of your understanding. Regardless of that, I think that, and speaking for the other jurors, that your sensitive processing and digesting of the information and of what was put in front of you is quite complimentary, even at the professional level. And the idea that you developed is not just in the design realm. It's really in the social services and sort of humanities. It really comes through on the project. So I definitely applaud you and team. You did a phenomenal job, and the project is absolutely stellar. I hope you got an A in the course.
Yeah, I think that the project definitely has like further repercussions, and having those conversations with our instructor, first of all, and people from that are actually working with these groups. I think it just tells you that urban design has to involve the community. It has to have compassion, has to engage in these smaller scale or transit parts of urban design. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thank you very much. I do have a couple more questions of the group, and this is really, again, as I mentioned before, it's all predicated on just giving our viewers and giving the Canadian audience maybe a peek under the hood of what drives our stellar urban design professionals to do what they do. So I'd like to maybe quickly circle back to Liz and Peter. At the small firm scale, of which some of us are quite familiar. How does the process of blending architecture and landscape architecture, or how does the process of meeting in a Liz, you called it transdimensional,
Yeah.
Right?
Transdisciplinary. Yeah.
Transdisciplinary, transdisciplinary process. How does that work in a small firm, and how do you combine and blend and therefore make sort of invisible the fields of landscape architecture versus architecture?
Can I jump?
Mm.
I think transdisciplinary practice, I mean, first of all, it's a term borrowed from Snoetta, and we certainly didn't coin it. I think there's a number of practices that are interested in a different kind of mode of practice, like Paul was suggesting, and I think really, I mean, I think there's a generation of designers that have grown up in a both and culture of design, and I think transdisciplinary practice is exactly the practice of a both and world. It's not really the theorizing of it anymore. It's really the implementation of both and thinking, and the dissolution. I mean, I think if we think of it from a regulatory practice point of view, I'm not sure most architects nor landscape architects or even planners could really write a column of prose that's longer. Cons that's longer than the prose when we separate our practices. I think I got that right. I think I actually got that backwards. Sorry. What I'm trying to say is that the net benefit of just dissolving boundaries amongst design practices is going to get us where we need to go.
Right.
This silo culture that we've inherited, the protectionism that has been forced upon us by regulatory bodies, by insurance policies, whatever it may be, by the innate competition of our businesses against one another as architects and landscape architects, is something that we are trying to challenge fundamentally as the thing that is eroding not just the success of individual practices, but the success of our profession,
perhaps,
and specifically, the hybrid practice of urban design. And so I think if there's one thing that Liz and I probably agree upon most, is that if we don't get a handle as designers on an idea of dissolving boundaries between practice and disciplines, design professions will be departments of engineering or even departments of planning in a couple of generations at the rate we're going. I mean, people really don't understand what we do. We're constantly defending territory or trying to kind of identify our presence in the world. And I think we're really interested in finding a solution to that problem through practice. And I don't think we would say that this is the answer, but it certainly shakes a few fruits off the tree.
Yeah.
It certainly gets a couple of things.
Yeah.
It's one of the answers as well.
Yeah, it opens opportunities, it opens conversations. And I think, we've had a lot of success since we put our two separate firms together about 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay, well done. I applaud your studio and your passion for it and your leadership in that realm. I mean, I have a degree in architecture and a degree in landscape architecture, and sometimes those debates and those battles happen in here.
We can do it like this.
Exactly. So I totally understand what you're saying. Now, maybe I'll open up the last sort of set of questions to the entire group. Something that I think is really important, and I think Peter and Liz sort of began that thread, is not just for you award recipients who've done an amazing job, and maybe not even for this generation, including myself, of design professionals, but for those that are looking at us and watching what we do and aspiring to continue where we leave off. If I were to ask any one of you to give us a little bit of an ethos or a little bit of a mandate for what you think should be, you know, topical, primary, paramount on our minds as urban designers. Let me put it that way. So we're all in the same boat. We're all putting on the same T-shirt. Where does urban design need to go, and what does it need to do for us in the years and decades ahead, given whatever concerns we have as a people, as a planet? Yeah, maybe this requires us to raise our hands or something so that we don't all speak at once. But I think I'd like to just throw that question out there to the group. And I'm not sure I can see everyone at the same time. So does anyone want to tackle that that question? Don't make me pick on you, because if I did,
I can jump in. I don't know if you can see my hand.
Oh, sorry.
Paul here.
Paul,
I'm joined by my trusty assistant here, so don't mind me.
Well done.
I'd maybe build on what Peter and Liz were saying, and moving beyond a transdisciplinary approach to a sort of approach of shared authorship, and looking at the urban design and really sort of meeting the community that we serve where they are. So much of our work is focused on sort of elite power structures, and that's just the nature of work, and probably more so in architecture than maybe other practices. I say that as an architect, but the ability to blur those boundaries and speak in plain language, translate fenestration to what that, you know, a nice sunshine on your lap when you're feeding your baby, and really meet the needs of people where they are. And even thinking about stuff like our work at Corner Commons, there was a sort of liberalization of a lot of these rules around COVID, and efforts by many municipalities to loosen up rules, create spaces outdoors and all of that. And when we tried to apply for permits, none of it fit what we were doing, because everything was based on consumption-based approaches, right? So you could do a patio next to your bar, you could do a parking lot for a market, you could do this for that, but it's like, no, we're not selling alcohol, we're not selling anything. We just want a place where people can meet, co-create, or even protest. And these are all activities that happen, but there wasn't a permit for it. And so negotiating those spaces, I think, is kind of a critical part for engaging urban design broadly as a practice. And I'd really maybe just applaud the work of Michelle and Youngmin. I think you've both engaged precisely that mode of practice in your work. So I'll leave it with that as a kind of ray of hope for our future work.
Fantastic. So Paul, my takeaway from what you just said is, or one of several takeaways, but you mentioned co-authorship, sort of a shared urban design platform that all design professionals get involved with and get into to help further the important work that we all have to do. Is that maybe a quick summary?
I'd go even further beyond design professionals, right? I can't remember, but I'll just attribute this to Peter Pragnell, ex U of T, that, you know, we are all architects, we're all experts in buildings. You've lived in a house your entire life, you are an expert in building. And those opinions are valued, and we, as sort of the professionals with the capital P in front of our names and lots of alphabet soup after, should listen to those experts as well.
Okay, well said. I think I have a hand up from Peter and Liz. You want to?
If someone else wants to jump in, that's cool. But I also, I mean, I love those sentiments, and also, you know, I think something that's really important as we move forward is thinking about how to engage everybody in the urban environment. You know, something that we are, you know, think about a lot is how to engage not just little kids and boys into kind of play spaces in our cities, but also young girls and adults as well. And what can we create for everyone that sort of sparks joy and in our urban realm. And I think there's a really fabulous article called Why So Serious Landscape Architect that if you haven't seen it, you should read it, because I read it every few weeks and it is inspiring us so much.
Oh, that's
and
wonderful.
I think, you know, it's really about, there are a lot of serious things happening and a lot of really important issues facing our cities, and we're going to have to address. But bringing joy into our city is also really important in our public realm, and we can't forget about that.
And that feeling that drawing people into the conversation, and I don't want to say tricking, but sort of accidentally bringing them into a moment of awe and a moment of internal movement where they will go back and think about the city building project as something that they want to participate in,
right,
is really the gift of the urban design movement. We aren't here really to execute programs so much as inspire people that they participate and the city is their house. Like, you know, Peter Pragnell, you know, I'm a U of T grad too. I mean, that's ingrained, but it isn't to erase the architect from the city building mission. And I think that might be some of the misinterpretation of Peter Pragnell's position on that. It's really to embrace the fact that we can lead the discussion as the makers of cultural space and draw people in and invite them in to participate in a very exciting, joyful conversation about the making of their own home, as opposed to one that is delivered to them from above or from afar.
Yes. Good point. Good point. Okay, let's keep this going. I have a hand up from Ryan Bragg. Ryan, please.
Yeah, I think just to, in some ways, build on some of what both Paul and Peter were talking about. I think there's an inclusivity, but there's also an intentional, or there should be an intent on the behalf of our profession and the collective profession to listen to others. But I think there's something else that was implied by some of those statements, which is that we're all problem solvers. We don't, and we tend to isolate, we silo our problems. Whereas in fact, maybe the only difference is scale to some degree. You know, it could be the same problem, but it's across all those scales. And it's not like one person be working on this, one should be working on that. We should look at that as a problem to be solved. And I think we're at a point where we may see within the impact on urban design, the sharing economy, you know, and those types of disruptors in our world are actually real potential for us to change things in a very good way. And one of the places where that occurs more than anything, and you see it in urban design all over the place, is transportation, and what is actually going to happen as we, you know, we start to look at autonomous vehicles and ride sharing, and what is a curb, and you know, is a curb actually a patio because we don't need as many vehicles, or are we going to wind up with this proliferation of vehicles and we don't have any room left for us? And I think those are really big issues that we've yet to sort of challenge ourselves with. But if we see those as problems that we can all work towards, then we'll find a better way out of it. And I'm an optimist. I think we will. But those are really interesting conundrums that we need to address.
Well, thank you. That's a great point, Ryan, and that's kind of a pivot point for me. We have just a few minutes to go. So I understand your larger comment. And so if I'm focusing in on one example of that, it's not because I didn't hear everything you said, but you did mention what happens with transportation as we move into a future of automation, or automated transit and shared ride sharing and all that sort of stuff. And it's perhaps where my original question came from, was perhaps looking at topical subjects in our generation leading into the kind of the next century that perhaps young and aspiring urban designers might consider focusing on, or at least beginning to develop solutions or begin to challenge those problems. I mean, climate change is upon us. I think anyone who lived in Winnipeg last winter will have something to say about that. But more than that, I think transportation is an issue. I think we've talked about homelessness and the mobility of homelessness in our urban spaces. Do any of those resonate, or are there more subjects or topics such as that topically we could point to and say, these are areas where perhaps our young urban designers and perhaps ourselves as practitioners should consider focusing on to some degree. And I'll just throw that open to the group for comment. Go right ahead.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think what we've been seeing, practicing mostly in the Toronto area, is the effects of densification. We always think of sustainability and resilience in the context of climate change and environment, but really we're seeing a ton of pressure on public spaces, the transformation of the city to vertical living, greater populations using smaller public spaces, and how do you make those spaces more resilient to accommodate that heavy use throughout the day, throughout the season, throughout the year, and do it creatively so that you're still creating beautiful spaces, but they are useful for everybody all the time. And in Toronto, we have, it's a city of ravines, and there's a pressure point there where public space becomes intruding into environmental space. And somehow we've got to manage that either from the inside of the valley or from the outside of the valley. So I think in terms of finding a position in practice that allows you to understand both the urban and the natural and meld those two together to create that appropriate resilience is a good focus for the professional forward with.
Interesting. That's a good point. That's certainly up there on the list, especially in our larger urban centers like Toronto. So yeah, thank you for that comment, Mark. I appreciate that. Are there any other maybe such topical issues, or perhaps I can pivot once more?
I don't want to take up the sound space, but I just the other side of the Toronto problem. I'm very familiar with the Toronto problem, and having moved to Winnipeg, there's another problem that faces cities drastically that aren't Toronto and possibly Montreal, which is the underuse of public space. And it speaks to the problem of the Canadian city as a political issue that we have to be able to address and be experts on as cultural thinkers, not just designers of space, but as stewards of what we've inherited and what we're about to build. The relationship between our municipalities and our provinces is not well taught, nor is it well understood by young graduates. And when we look at models from the States and we try to implement those here, we enter, the great dissolution of, well, why can't I do that here? Well, really, it has to come down to funding and the capacity of our municipalities to afford the kind of investment in public space that the Canadian city really requires. It requires a very different amount of investment because of the seasons it has to endure. It requires a very different kind of investment because of the thinness of our population. And it requires a very different kind of funding model because of the very thinness of our tax dollar that's spent on cities. And until we've really embraced that, I don't think we're going to see much change in the Canadian city unless we as urban designers can start to champion that change and form some kind of lobby group in the culture and in the political system that stewards the urban realm and says this is our space and we need to take it over politically and not away from the municipalities, but we need to assist the municipalities by kind of allowing the electorate to understand they are involved in a thin public realm if we continue to live in a world with a very thin tax dollar being spent on the urban realm. We see that in Winnipeg, we see the example of sprawl in our city. It translates into irreparable streets that we can't repair. It's just a funding problem. The city's gone too big. There's not enough people living in the house and we can't repair it. It's that type of model. So to summarize that, the big challenge of urban design in Canada for us who live in middle to low cities, not Toronto, who are faced with the joy of development, we're faced with the joy of maintaining something that's getting irreparable over time. And it is a chronic problem that is going to shackle the country pretty quickly if we don't get a hold of it.
So that's interesting, Peter. So we're talking about a range of issues in the urban realm in Canada that so kind of a multiplicity of Canadian urban civic problems. At the one end, over densification causing extreme pressures on public space and urban design solutions. At the other end, the exact opposite, causing an abandonment or an inability by municipalities to maintain urban infrastructure that already exists, let alone create new spaces. So that's a real sort of feeding trough for you graduates, or for even us to solve that range of problems across Canadian cities. So thanks for that. Devin, I did see your hand up, and I hope you haven't forgotten your thought, but
No.
certainly would like to hear your input.
Exactly what you discussed at the just at the end there was exactly what I was going to say about maintenance and for municipalities, and also for students coming out of planning, out of architecture, out of landscape architecture school, to understand that we have to do such a better job at educating everybody about how these spaces are going to be taken care of into the future. We do so many projects where they're so celebrated right at the beginning, and they're just these amazing projects that the capital budget was there, they're implemented, and then you go back to you're visiting it 2 years later, and you just all you want to do is cry because of how poorly these spaces are taken care of, because no one saved any put any money in the budget to keep them up.
Devin, the trick is that we're supposed to be serious about it, but we have to be joyful at the same time.
Yeah.
So we also have to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Can't be too cynical about it, because then we're throwing our hands up.
So I'm gonna again applaud all of you on all of your projects, and really this is in a way an unprecedented forum for celebrating urban design in Canada. I don't think in the past we've had this much opportunity for dialogue at the award reception event. In a way, it's the virtual nature of this has given that sort of more depth, and I definitely celebrate that, and I celebrate you and your projects. I want to maybe wrap up the conversation with one optimistic and celebratory, joyful question, and certainly it's I'm happy to make this a kind of a free-for-all, so just speak when the thought comes to you, really. But here's the question. This is something I want to take away and maybe digest personally and across the board. If one were to ask you, or let me set up the question. So urban design is about interaction. There's forces, there's people, there's municipalities, there's funding, there's civic and social issues. There's a lot of different vectors that intersect and interact to create urban design, to create a problem that requires a solution. What kinds of interaction and what kinds of topics create a successful urban design project? So if you were just to define what a successful urban design project is, let's be joyful about that, but let's seriously consider what's the rubric for success at the urban design scale, transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, whatever you want to call it, across our individual professions. give us, you know, a few points that help define urban design success that we can all take away from this award ceremony. That's a tough one, I know. Oh, come on, Liz. You know you want to say something.
We're just chatting. I guess, you know, we're talking about like, is this more like a test, but is it used? Is it loved? I guess, you know, how have people, I mean, that's always sort of the ultimate test and goal, I guess, with our projects. Like I always talk about, once we finish something, we kind of give it away, and it's like, here you go, it's yours now. And understanding how people use it, and I guess love it, and you know, is it graffitied or is it not graffitied? And you know, like those kinds of things we always look at after the fact. And yeah, is it used? Is it loved?
Is
I guess.
Used, and will people take ownership over it when you give it away? And I think that is the litmus test. That is a successful urban design project.
Yeah.
So just counterpointing that comment. So what you're really saying is,
can it be programmed? Can people take it over and give it?
That's a different answer, Peter. That's a different answer. Right? I'm still on the first one, which what I'm hearing out of that is, you know, even though we are the stewards, let's call ourselves stewards now, not even the experts, but the stewards of urban design and urban space. The actual owners of urban space are the users, and they ultimately will dictate success and failure by their engagement and their use of the space. That's my takeaway from the first part of basically from Liz's answers. That I must have missed something, but does that kind of work?
Yeah, I think that's our goal. Yeah, I think that's what we found makes it successful urban design.
Positive ownership and positive user experience and user engagement of the space. So ultimately, they define success. And then Peter, you jumped into, can the space be programmed? But what if it can't? What if it's not supposed to be? I mean, I'm now being a bit of a, you know.
Yeah, we often play with the idea of universal access. You know, often when you're dealing with things like universal access and universal opportunity, there's always an asterisk. There's always some authority who has an asterisk about, well, no skateboarders, please, no loitering, please, no sleeping, please. And you know,
public, but not really.
Public, but with an asterisk beside it. And we take great offense to that idea of public space. You know, we can't solve all social problems as designers and architects, and I don't think we should be responsible nor feel responsible for doing that. That happens at a higher level than us. I think our job is to respond to the contexts in which we're operating and the dream for which we're designing for. It's up to a lot of other mechanisms and other orders to you know, help prescribe the right kinds of use for the public realm. So, you know, if we're creating great, you know, outdoor space across from City Hall, but City Hall doesn't want to program it, you know, we can't take responsibility for the success there. It's going to be guarded, and there's going to be security guards keeping people away. Well, I don't think that's going to be such successful space myself.
Right. Now, just to, you know, let's remember that this is the National Urban Design Awards ceremony, not the National Political Forum ceremony or the National Municipal Politics, you know, forum. So absolutely, at some point, and I think the idea of inclusivity is fantastic, but at some point, this forum and all of us who are, you know, happily signed into this forum is about what we can achieve within the urban design space, acknowledging that there's elements of our universe that exist outside of our ability to control and our ability to contribute. But within the sort of the tracks of urban design, how about we do this? How about we just say, are there any last joyful or inspiring statements or comments? I mean, you are effectively, the group of you are phenomenal flagship examples and and professionals and experts from across Canada. You represent the best of all of us in the urban design space here. I'm honored to be speaking with all of you. I'd love for some inspiring last words. And I think Ryan has his hand up. So if you can maybe give me and the audience some last inspiring words that we can take away, then I think my work here would be complete. Ryan.
I think this kind of speaks to probably 3/4 of the projects as well. I think we need to break the right rules. We live in a construct where they try and tell us to do all these things that, and we got to break the right rules. That's it. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Be happy while we do it.
I love it. Joyful. That's a great thing. Break the right rules that shouldn't exist in the first place. Let's see, Paul, you had your hand up, I think, next.
Sure, I'll maybe just take your invitation to be joyful and be a bit Pollyanna-ish in the response. So I'll just excuse me immediately. But I think there's a connection between what Liz and Peter were saying around places you can kind of fall in love with. I mean, when I did my first streetscape project where a guy performed himself dancing to a Solange song and put it, and it went viral on social media, I felt I had made it. And then when I've had buildings demolished, you feel like you're at the lowest low. So somewhere in between there is a community that actually acts as stewards of the place and takes up that ownership, which I think Peter was getting to. But I think if that is very successful, then it addresses Devin's problem around operational budgets. Then that issue goes away. If you get the kind of the broader stewardship and adoption of your place. And I think somewhere in there is a universal answer or universal approach, regardless of scale, geography, or what city we're in and financial considerations. It'll size itself to the appropriate solution, I think.
The appropriate solution. That's profound. That you're absolutely right, I think. Stewardship. I have a hand up from Frank D'Ambrosio.
Yes, thank you. I've listened through the whole thing and I really commend the organization for having this forum. And it's so great to hear all your voices. I've been at this a little longer than some of you or most of you. And I just wanted to congratulate you on a program that you wanted to end positively. I think the National Urban Design Awards are an encouraging, positive reflection of what's going on out there and a consciousness about urban design. And the last thing I want to say is that urban design must be part of every architectural project, every project. I think to distance it from architecture or from planning or from landscape architecture is further fragmenting our profession into multiple disciplines where really it's all about resilient and livable city building. So every developer, every public sector client has to be conscious that when they're developing a building or any kind of infrastructure, that they're building part of urban design. They are conducting urban design. So we have to remind them as architects that we're not just doing a building, we're doing a piece of the city that has ramifications much wider than the immediate audience or occupant.
I think that's well said.
Doing what you're doing, but make it part of every design.
Thank you for those words of those sage words, Frank. That definitely is positive, and that's unless someone wants to jump in and drop something else on the mic, I think those were very appropriate and very thoughtful last words. Thank you again, Frank.
I agree, Emeka. Thank you so much for being our moderator tonight. What a fascinating conversation. There's one thing we must do though, and that's the American Sign Language round of applause for our award winners, which is the waving of the hands, everybody. So congratulations, félicitations à tout le monde. Que de formidable projet, and a really fabulous discussion. And we should also probably raise a glass or in Paul's case, a bottle if there's one nearby. So again, a cheers to everybody. And thank you for joining us on this wonderful, wonderful event.
Thank you,
And thank you to the award winners for being so open and sharing all of these challenges and successes. What a great moment. Thank you. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone. And congratulations on an award well deserved.